On November 13th, Germany's finance minister, Lars Klingbeil, made a statement that shocked the entire European market. He said, "We have agreed within the G7 that we will take the lead and look at how we can take stronger action against junk products," referring to Chinese products which are becoming increasingly prevalent in Europe. According to official EU data, in 2024 alone, 4.6 billion e-commerce parcels valued at less than €150 entered the EU, 91% of which originated from China. Germany, as Europe's strongest economy, has always had close relations with China. However, recent moves by Germany have been surprising, as it seems to be shifting away from its close economic and trade relationship with China. What exactly happened? Let's take a closer look. On November 14, Italian energy giant Snam confirmed it had officially cancelled its plan to acquire a minority stake in Germany's largest independent natural gas transmission company, OGE. According to Reuters, the German Ministry of Economy reviewed the deal, using its Foreign Direct Investment Review mechanism. The ministry opposed the deal not directly because of Snam, but because of the indirect investment from the Chinese State Grid Corporation, a state-owned enterprise. Two people familiar with the matter revealed that Berlin was concerned about the €920 million deal precisely because of Snam's indirect ties to the Chinese state grid. The state grid is an indirect investor in the Italian state-owned financial institution CDP Reti, which controls Snam. Although State Grid holds only a minority stake, Berlin fears that allowing a company with ties to Chinese state capital to be involved in the operation of critical German infrastructure poses a security risk. Snam originally planned to acquire a 25% stake in Vir Gas Holding, the owner of OGE. OGE operates Germany's largest natural gas pipeline network, which is critical to Germany's national energy security and the cross-border transport of natural gas within Europe. Therefore, it is considered a key piece of infrastructure. This is not the first time Germany has blocked Chinese state-owned capital. As early as 2018, the German government stopped China State Grid from acquiring a stake in Germany's power grid operator, 50 Hertz. The failure of the Snam deal clearly reflects a broader trend in Europe. Governments across Europe are adopting a tougher stance on investments from non-EU countries, especially those involving Chinese state-owned enterprises. In November, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz also announced that, for national security reasons, Chinese suppliers like Huawei will be excluded from Germany's future telecommunications network. Merz, speaking at a business conference in Berlin that day, said the government had decided to replace existing components with domestically produced ones in all possible areas, such as in the 5G network. He emphasized that Germany will not allow any components from China in the 6G network. Last year, Germany had already ordered telecom operators to remove Huawei equipment from their core networks, citing national security risks. Bloomberg reported last month that Berlin is now considering using public funds to subsidize companies like Deutsche Telekom to remove Chinese-made equipment. Merz disclosed that at the upcoming Digital Sovereignty Summit with French President Emmanuel Macron, he would address the issue of reducing reliance on large tech companies from China, the US, and other major players. On the same day, the German parliament also appointed a panel of experts to review energy and raw material imports, as well as Chinese investments in key infrastructure sectors. The panel will reassess Germany's trade policy with China. Jürgen Matthes, head of international economic policy at the German Economic Institute, said, "China can and will turn off the tap in critical areas. We remain far too vulnerable, so the pressure to act is now much higher." Germany's relationship with China seems to be deteriorating rapidly. This shift is due to the German government's growing recognition of the subtle yet severe damage China's disruption of the international trade system has caused. Germany's heavy reliance on Chinese raw materials and markets has reached a dangerously high level. Without breaking this dependency soon, Germany's industrial base and economic security will be at risk. Germany is increasingly realizing that compared to the global economic impact of the trade war launched by US President Donald Trump, the tactics employed by the Chinese Communist Party have caused even greater harm to Germany and the entire European economy. As a massive communist country, China has, through decades of strategic planning, gained control over global supply chains in critical sectors like pharmaceuticals and rare earths, holding monopolies in many of them. The Chinese government is now increasingly using these monopolies as geopolitical leverage, ready to launch devastating attacks at any time in these key areas. A recent example is Beijing using its rare earth monopoly as a weapon to pressure trade partners. China now has the ability to produce its own cars and machinery, and products from China are continuously flooding the German market. Meanwhile, it is becoming more difficult for German products to enter China. From 2016 to 2023, China remained Germany's largest trading partner. However, in 2024, bilateral trade between the US and Germany surpassed that of Germany and China, making the US Germany's largest trading partner. Yet, between January and August of this year, Germany's trade with China once again exceeded that with the US. For Germany, China's return as the largest trade partner is not a good sign. German economist Dorothea Siems also believes that President Trump, during his first term, criticized the Chinese government for violating fair trade principles and recklessly undermining international trade rules. Today's reality proves that Trump's criticism was accurate. She pointed out that for years, warnings about the dangers of excessive economic dependence on China have been ignored by German business executives, leading to the current awkward situation in Germany's economy. Analysts point out that Germany's automotive companies heavily rely on specialized chips produced by Nexperia, a Dutch semiconductor company controlled by the Chinese company Wingtech Technology. These chips are used for power control by BMW and Volkswagen, and they must be packaged in China. With Beijing's announcement of export controls on these products, German automotive production lines now face the risk of shutting down at any moment. Beijing has even attempted to move Nexperia's chip factory from Hamburg, Germany to China. This would directly destroy Europe's entire automotive chip supply chain. The automotive industry is a pillar of Germany's economy, and the huge crisis facing both Germany's domestic car industry and Europe's automotive sector is seen as the key trigger for Germany's full-blown confrontation with the Chinese Communist Party. In September, the Dutch government decided to take control of Nexperia. The key figure behind this important decision is Dutch Minister of Economic Affairs Vincent Karaman. He said that he would not change his decision if given another chance. The recent speech by Germany's finance minister clearly signaled strong government-level support for the Dutch decision. Recently, Karaman gave his first detailed account of the Nexperia dispute in an interview. He discussed his consultations with German counterparts, the automotive sector, and senior U.S. officials. He also mentioned key intelligence showing that Nexperia's Chinese CEO was transferring some of the company's operations to China, describing the dispute as an economic thriller. Karaman said that the 6-week deadlock between the EU and Beijing over Nexperia's role in the automotive semiconductor supply chain was a wake-up call to world leaders. Nexperia was acquired by Wingtech Technology in 2018. In 2023, the U.S. informed the Dutch government about the possibility of adding Wingtech Technology to its list of companies that could pose a national security threat. That same year, the Dutch government engaged in discussions with Wingtech founder and Nexperia CEO Chancellor. They wanted to ensure Nexperia's independence. The Netherlands required Nexperia to establish an independent supervisory board and insisted that Zhang Xuezheng could not hold both the CEO and HR manager positions simultaneously. Karaman said, "I spoke to Mr. Zhang about this in the ministry last summer. He was telling me that they were very much on board. We had a list of measures to be taken, and then we would engage with the Americans and say this is a Dutch company." But in September, the situation took a sudden turn. Someone came to my office and said, "Minister, we need to talk." Then they informed me about what Zhang was doing, transferring intellectual property, laying off employees, and planning to move production from Hamburg to China. The minister refused to reveal the identity of the informants, but made it clear that there's evidence that this transfer is indeed happening. According to a letter Karaman sent to the Dutch parliament in September, the Dutch government received serious allegations about governance failures within Nexperia, all linked to Zhang Xuezheng. On September 30th, citing risks to European economic security, the Dutch government took control of Nexperia's corporate oversight. The government invoked a Cold War-era law, a measure that had never been used before. The Dutch Minister of Economic Affairs emphasized that this matter had nothing to do with the United States' decision on September 19th to place Nexperia on its import control list. He emphasized that the Netherlands was not pushed or pressured by the U.S. He explained that the Dutch government had received a notification from the US because they were about to enter a government shutdown and wanted to confirm whether Nexperia would be included in the new export control list. The Dutch government's takeover triggered a strong reaction from Beijing, which immediately imposed a 4-day ban on the export of Nexperia semiconductor chips from China. This caused disruptions in the automotive manufacturer supply chains. After a meeting between President Trump and CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping in late October, Beijing agreed to resume the supply of Nexperia chips to Europe. Following the decision to intervene in Nexperia, tensions escalated between the Netherlands and China. Kermans had a phone conversation with Germany's Minister of Economics, Katharina Reisch. The German minister expressed support for the Dutch action, but also voiced deep concerns about the potential impact on the automotive industry. Soon, leaders from the EU, the US, China, France, and other parts of the world were informed of the developments. Kermans stated, "We weren't intending to go public on this. We wanted to solve this swiftly and silently." Regarding the possible future developments, Kermans said, "We are in direct touch with the German car industry and with other car manufacturers and clients of Nexperia. They will let us know when they receive the chips, and once the supply resumes and we are confident it will continue, then we will take the appropriate steps that are needed by the Dutch government to resolve this issue." Kermans hopes this incident will serve as a wake-up call to make everyone realize the dangers of relying too heavily on a single country for critical technologies or raw materials. He stated, if Wingtech had moved its semiconductor wafer production to China, then this interdependence that Europe had with China would have changed to a full dependency. That would have been very dangerous for Europe. In recent weeks, negotiations to resolve the chip shortage issue have made progress, with Beijing stating that it is helping Nexperia restore some of its Chinese factory exports. Nexperia's headquarters has said that there has been positive progress. China's actions so far are mainly exemptions from the export restrictions, and the full restoration of Nexperia's supply chain has not yet occurred. Nexperia has manufacturing plants in Germany and the UK, where the wafers are sent to factories in China, Malaysia, and the Philippines for testing and assembly. Then they're shipped back to Europe. The Dongguan factory in Guangdong province is one of Nexperia's largest factories globally. Analysts say that China not only wants to control the supply chain of German automotive chips in China, but also aims to sever Germany's domestic supply chain. Its sinister intentions are making it impossible for Germany, the Netherlands, and other European countries to tolerate further. They have come to realize that despite the time and process it will take, decoupling from communist China is an irreversible trend, no matter the cost. In this process, EU members, including Germany, have discovered a reassuring message. That message is Taiwan. On November 7th, Reinhard Bütikofer, a prominent German politician supporting Taiwan, spoke at the European Value Summit in Prague. He stated that over the past 6 years, Europe's understanding and attitude towards Taiwan have undergone a fundamental change. Before 2019, the European Parliament barely discussed Taiwan, only mentioning it in documents. Now, Europe is increasingly aware that the security of the Taiwan Strait is inseparable from its own interests. He pointed out that the shift in Europe's attitude is due to 3 factors: China's actions, Taiwan's performance, and the adjustment of Europe's geopolitical thinking. First, the CCP's crackdown on the Hong Kong pro-democracy movement made Europe see clearly that Beijing is pursuing an aggressive revisionist agenda. Second, the Russia-Ukraine war revealed that despite claiming to be neutral, Beijing supported Russia politically, economically, and in terms of propaganda. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi stated that China doesn't want Russia to lose the war, which further raised alarms in Europe. Europe recognized that China is effectively admitting to directly aiding Russia. At the same time, Europe began to reassess Taiwan's intrinsic value, no longer viewing Taiwan through the lens of cross-strait relations, but recognizing its democratic resilience and substantial contributions, such as its world-leading semiconductor industry, its ability to combat information manipulation, and its effective pandemic response. Bütikofer stated that Europe previously emphasized the separation of trade and security, but after China weaponized economic tools, this view had to change. A large number of European trade routes pass through the Taiwan Strait, and if the region becomes unstable, Europe's security and economy will be impacted. He mentioned that Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi recently tried to make the One China principle central to Germany-China relations, but Germany has never recognized China's version of the One China principle. Instead, Germany follows its own One China policy and opposes Beijing's use of force on the Taiwan issue. He warned that Beijing is using diplomacy and international organizations to pressure Europe, but Europe's alertness remains insufficient. Bütikofer emphasized that Taiwan is a key part of the first island chain in the Indo-Pacific, and its security directly affects Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, Australia, and the entire region. He urged Europe to move beyond the old thinking that Taiwan is a special case and to reconsider Taiwan's importance from a geopolitical perspective, because Taiwan's security is also Europe's security. Recent statements from two high-ranking German officials shows that Germany, the economic engine of Europe, has made a rapid about-face, distancing itself from the CCP. What terrifies the Chinese Communist Party the most is that Europe has found the real value in Taiwan. This not only shames the CCP, but also makes its ambitions to annex Taiwan increasingly unlikely.